to go to the mic that's, Elizabeth's walking by right now. There's the mic. And as I say, I'm going to ask the second person to come up and be ready to roll anyway. You don't have to stand there, but there's an empty seat right there, so you'll be ready to roll too, so we don't have a lot of delay. We'll allow 30 seconds for question, and 90 seconds for an answer. The first name I draw is John Lizzo.
The Capilano suspension bridge has been attempting for the past 5 years to expand their parking lot right down from the bridge to the extent that they've allowed 14 rental units and a duplex unit to remain abandoned for 5 years. They finally knocked them down. Well, all the council members pledged not to allow the suspension bridge to put a parking lot on this property and instead develop it for housing.
Who is your question to?
All of the,
No, we can't. It has to be
Mayor Little is well versed, and Jordan Back has actually.
You have to make a pick, sir. You have to make a pick. Who do you want to deal with?
Jordan Back.
All right, thank you.
Testing. Good evening, John. Nice to see you. I do recall walking the site with you. I have to say that I have a soft spot for the suspension bridge only because as a teenager, like a lot of teenagers, worked a couple of summers there. They are a large employer on the North Shore, particularly for young people. But I really don't have any interest in expanding parking there. I think, as was talked about earlier, I think there's more that can be done with shuttles and maybe working with transit. But the fact that we lost housing on that site, which was housing that could have been fixed up, is problematic. So no is the answer.
Thank you. Show hands of what? Well, no, it seems not. Graham is next, followed by Aaron Stevenson.
Hello. I just want to give a background. My name is Graham Alexander. I'm a developer. There's some history to my question, and I want to be very clear. I talked to Jim Hance. I talked to all the councillors about a year ago. I got $20 million in these homes. I bought with Kyle Wash and C-SPAN. I couldn't get a straight answer from Lisa, Betty Forbes, and Jim Hance. I still can't get a clear answer from these guys. I swear, are you guys speaking? I mean, honestly, I have a question for Catherine. Catherine, as we all know that this council across Canada, in terms of delays, is probably more time than anybody. I'm a young guy.
Question, sir.
My question to Catherine, who would you elect, if you were me, who would be your council this time of year? That's a good question, make it easy on boards like myself.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
I hear your frustration. You know what? Let's talk after this, and I can tell you what my choices are.
Thank you. No, thank you, sir. Thank you. Aaron Stevenson. Aaron Stevenson, followed by Lane North. Okay. Sorry.
Can you hear me? A little nervous. I'm a Hansworth mom, and my question is for Matthew Bond. Recently, actually today, we saw a wonderful statement from you and Jordan about supporting the turf, the track. Awesome. And to see all the hands up that everybody supports it, we're super pumped about that. My question to you, Matthew, is how are you going to make that happen? We've sat idle for 4 years. years on this. Argyle sat for 5 years. We're hearing stories about finger pointing between the school board, the district. We just want a plan.
So I think it was actually Mayor Little that explained a little bit of the history behind the other turf fields and the process. One thing I think is that challenge with the school board has now been resolved as part of the Argyle field. And so we'll be sitting down immediately after council and the mayor are elected and working with the new school board to prioritize that project. It's going to be probably around $7 to $8 million when you include the track and the field together. I'm including a healthy cost contingency because of construction cost escalation. That's my engineering brain right now. But it's an investment for our kids. It's an investment for a generation of kids at Handsworth, and Edgemont and Handsworth and everyone on the side of the district deserves one just like everyone else.
Lane North, followed by Robin Delaney.
Good evening. There are a number of questions I can ask, but since I can only ask one person, I figure maybe I should ask someone who's not a councillor, but who's been waltzing for the longest. Peter Teven, you've been waltzing council for 5 years. You've seen various situations come and go. How do you think council could be more efficient in taking a plan and sticking to it that's going to help the community?
That's an important question. I think probably the first thing that a council ought to do is listen to each other. This current council has spent and wasted a lot of time with arguing over stuff that is not its main mission. And what I hope that the new council does is looks at the things that they have in common that they can get done rather than the things that they have in difference. People can argue all day long about the differences in opinion, but sometimes agreements on common themes are right in front of them and they get left undone. So I think a lot more will get done if we focused on things like that. As a person watching for 5 years, I've seen more than my share of time wasted on disagreement rather than finding what's in common.
Followed by Shirley Kitchen.
I'm Robin Delaney with the Edgemont Village Merchants Association. And my question is, several months ago, probably 6 to 9 months ago, a proposal was put forth to reduce the speed limit in Edgemont Village from 50 to 30. And it was put forth by a retired prof from UBC who's now, I believe, in Ottawa, receiving an Order of Canada award, which is beside the point. But it does make a ton of sense. Don Mathenick has approached the merchants and we've given him full support, and we had an executive decision, an executive vote, and it was unanimously voted to do a pilot project. So my question to Mike Little and to Matt Bond is, pardon me? Mayor Mike Little, will you support this pilot project?
Yes, thank you very much for the question, Robin. Yes, I will support the pilot project. I do think in the village centers and close to our elementary schools, we need to talk about managing speed limits, both through traffic calming and setting regulations. But as I said earlier in the meeting, it's also about enforcing that and making sure that we have the resources in place. I walk the village on a regular basis. I've seen near misses, particularly crossing the street from your store. And it's something that we need to be responsive to. And I think Don is here today as well, as I thought I saw him earlier. So, but I'd be happy to talk to you about it further, but I'm fully supportive of doing a pilot project in the village. It shouldn't be the route that people run through the community. We want to reduce the amount of traffic and make sure that the traffic that is in the village is actually traffic destined for the village. One of the challenges with that is Susan's not going to cut me off. I'm going to keep going. But one of the other things, we don't want to also have the inadvertent, unintended consequence of pushing more traffic onto Colwood, because we don't want it running in front of the school as well. So that's one of the challenges. We got to keep the village flowing well enough so that we're not pushing traffic onto Colwood in front of the elementary school. But I do think that a pilot project in that space would be completely reasonable.
Shirley Kitchen, followed by Carmen Jensen.
How do you suggest that we remedy the congestion at Capilano and Marine Drive? It's been a nightmare for 30 years, and it's really dreadful now with all those apartments that are half empty and nobody can afford. But the density, the traffic there is dreadful. Thank you.
Hello? Oh, there we go. Thank you for that question. So there is, the new bus lane that is part on Marine Drive, the queuing lane to get onto the Lionsgate Bridge. But what I talked about in my speech earlier was the amount of uses. There is no grocery store in that new village. Part of the sustainable model of densifying at the bridgeheads was to be able to put a butcher, a baker, and a candlestick maker in the area. And we have been remiss at forcing through zoning the requirements that sustainable communities have. This community is sustainable in Edgemont because it has all of those services. You don't need to drive. It's, people around the village can walk here. They can grocery shop, they can get a coffee, they can buy a gift, they can get their hair done, etc. They can go to the bank. But in the two Lower Lynn, or the Lower Lynn and the Lower Capilano, the services that are coming out of those communities are out of a very broad list of services. And I think the district needs to be more explicit in what those services are. I think I use Marine Drive as an example as well. We just allowed whatever to go in out of a very extensive list in that area. And now we've got banks, chiropractors, doctors, which are all important. But you're still having to get in your car to drive, to go grocery shopping, to drive, to get your hair done. And that is contributing to the unsustainability of some of these areas. So it's through zoning where we can control a lot of it. But density with parking spots brings cars. And that seems to be the direction the majority of council would like to go in.
Thank you. Carmen Jensen, followed by Paul Hodgson.
Hi, my question is for Mayor Little. My name is Carmen Jensen. I'm the Handsworth co-chair of the PAC, and my question has to do with the Handsworth ATF again. You told us recently that the Argyle was funded by the Capital Reserve Fund, and you intend to use the same fund to build a ATF at Handsworth. But first we have to wait a few years for the fund to be replenished. How many years? And resources that can be used to get this done sooner.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's a good question. So all I was trying to explain was the history of how we got to the point where we were able to fund the Argyle project, which was every year when you pay your taxes, since going back to 2004, you've had an increase that's based on sort of the increase in the budget around that's related to inflation. And then we also added a 1% asset renewal fund, and that's been going since 2004. And so we used that fund to be able to replenish different reserves to be able to complete projects. So the Argyle project entered the 5-year capital plan. The source of funds was this annual fund that comes forward. There are ways to speed things up, and that's bringing partners to the table. The federal government routinely has their own reserve fund, which is called the RIG fund. The RIG fund is to support infrastructure projects in the community. I'd be happy to meet with yourself and local MP Jonathan Wilkinson to talk about whether this would be a suitable project for the RIG funds, and I'd be happy to start that conversation right away. We also happen to have the school board chair, Colbert Mann, over here. Get her re-elected. I'd be happy to work with all of you to try and see what other sources we can bring to bear. It will be the school district's land. We don't mind contributing to recreation in our community. We've already made a massive investment in recreation throughout our community with about 54 sports fields in total. But this is one where we can, I think, work together with the federal government to get the funds in place. Thank you very much.
Paul Hodgson, to be followed by Andrea Krupa.
Good evening. I'm a local resident, so I have a very local question, really. I want to ask about the plans for sidewalks and bicycle routes, which will now include, of course, scooter routes along Ridgewood Drive here. I think you've ignored this for about 70 years, apart from when you put in the north sidewalk after a child got hit. But otherwise, you seem to be ignoring this. The demand is there. The kids are going back and forth to school. The cyclists try to use it. There's not enough room. What are you going to do? And I'll ask this question of Herman Ma.
Sorry, it's Paul. Great. Thank you for the question, Paul. I believe in, as they call it, active transportation, but we need a connected bike route, so I'm in favor of that. My daughter right now is going to Carson, and we live in Cap. She wants to ride her bike there, but we don't think it's safe for her, right? She's going to highway and go all these other routes. So that's just an example that we need a more connected bike path throughout the whole district. We need to prioritize that because it is the safety of our kids, and that's about building communities. So I hope that answers you, that this is a priority for me.
Thank you. It doesn't answer my question. What the district's going to do about this?
Thank you. Are you done? If you finish, then that's fine. The next question is Andrea Krupa. I hope I have not mispronounced the name. Tell me how it is.
Hi, I'm Andrea Krupa. I'm going to ask a question about the commercial development side of things. So I run a satellite technology company downtown. I've been a lifetime resident of the North Shore. And we actually looked to move our company to North Vancouver. And there wasn't a single commercial building that was set up to be able to handle the type of data server rooms that we require. And so I'm curious, and I guess maybe for Matthew Bond, because you're an engineer, I'm curious what process the district goes through to assess the commercial opportunities and capacities that are available and how those are prioritized.
One thing I love about this this format and this all candidates meeting compared to the other ones is all of the questions are very, very detailed and very, very thoughtful. So thank you for that question. I do think that the district, especially in our official community plan, has not looked at commercial and business class types of office space. It was not really a focus in the official community plan. We were focused on light industrial, housing across the spectrum. So our official community plan is actually coming due at 2030. There's 8 years left. And so I would think it's time to initiate a new review. We just did a detailed review, but we actually need to start looking out to 2040 and 2050 and determine, is there a need for that type of office space, whether it's Class A or it includes technology in the district, and look where we might be able to locate that. That's not something that's been a priority of council for many years. But I think it's something we do need to look at. There's many business owners now, I know on the North Shore, that have either moved their businesses, their tech businesses, their engineering businesses off the North Shore, partly because of housing, but also because of a lack of appropriate spaces to stay on the North Shore.
And Greg Roberts would like to say something.
Thank you. One of the ideas is if you take a look at a city like New York, and you look at these big skyscrapers that they have, the first 4 or 5 stories are businesses, they are offices, and the rest is residential. Sometimes it's flipped around, but that typically is the structure. You'll see that in Montreal and Toronto as well. So as we're looking forward in the rest of the OCP, is there an opportunity to look at the initial floors of some of these buildings that we're putting up and actually create them as office space. And they would be on transit. They would allow for people to either work on the North Shore and live on the North Shore, or easily commute from downtown. So your existing employees, should they live in Gastown, if they could get across here easily on a transit hub, and then they could, you could office in one of these buildings. We do see that in other cities, and I think we have to look at that as an option.
I have no more audience questions. I've got one last one here, sort of a general question. It may be suggested that in large part, residents pay attention only when council and district staff are doing something which directly affects them. How can council improve community engagement? And I'll ask this question, Jim Hansen. And you have cards, feel free to use it.
Well, I've been reminded during the whole discussion today about how complicated a lot of the decisions that council makes are, and how much analysis all of us and painstaking work and deliberation that we put into these decisions. And of course, it's very hard for us to communicate and get this kind of detail out to you. One thing that I sought to initiate this spring was to have a regular time when council was available to speak to the public. And by a vote of a majority of council, that idea wasn't pursued. And I don't know why, but I'm going to bring that idea back should I have the privilege of being re-elected, because I think at very least, all of us should appear once a week. We show up in council, but I'd like us to appear in another location once a week where you know we're going to be there, and you can come and speak to us about the issues of council. And if it's something like 600 West Queens, instead of just coming up with a fantasy as to what occurred, you can come and have a detailed discussion. We can get into a bit of the nitty-gritty, and you can understand the difficult process of weighing the pros and cons of these, what I can assure you, are very challenging decisions for our community. Thank you very much.
Okay, Val, would like to say something?
Yeah, thanks, Jim. One of the very difficult decisions council had to make last session was in Deep Cove, where 60 trees came out for the Gallant storm drain replacement. Now, no one's going to argue that replacement wasn't needed, but there's 30 of those trees that came out for a temporary road. And I've been in that community talking to people, and they didn't feel well consulted with about this. A lot of them, the first time they saw it was when the trees were coming out, and even in the newspapers, it seems like councilors weren't fully aware that this was happening. So I think there has to be better consultation when projects like this are affecting communities, and things like this can happen again. It's not, these engineering projects are necessary, but there has to be proper consultation. And in that case, there was question of the residents, was that road even needed? Well, could there not have been regular one lane use as so many other construction projects use? So, thank you.
First.
Yeah, I think it's a great question about how can the citizens be more engaged, and how can council engage with citizens. The problem is that there's only 6 councillors and 1 mayor, and there's only 24 hours in a day, and I'm sure the councillors, as much as they may be doing a good job of consulting with the public, their time is limited. And as the population of the district grows, I think that it behooves us to think about some kind of mechanism whereby citizens can have a more direct say on issues like the ones we've talked about tonight. Like, does this street need a sidewalk? Yes, it probably does. Can the community at the community association level, or perhaps even some new form of local association? Perhaps it's a combination of the Merchants Association and Community Association. There are other cities that have really pioneered this. Los Angeles has a great system of neighborhood councils and provides training and education for the leaders of those councils. So does Edmonton. They have a great system of community leagues. So we can look to those case studies.
Thank you. Harrison Johnson.
So I think this is something that everyone in the community needs. I was actually out talking to some grade 5 and 6 class earlier today, and they specifically asked, Why is it that we only hear from councillors, council candidates, mayor during elections? The grade 5s and 6s wanted to have input on public decisions. They wanted the council and mayor to come to them, to ask them what they want for the future of their community. And I think that everyone in this group wants that. So we need to make it a lot easier for members of the public to have that input. And the way to do that is we have to stop going to a library or community center and expecting the public to come to us. We have to go to the public. We have to actively seek out the voices that are underrepresented often in decision making, like possibly those grade 5 and 6 students who feel like their voices are being ignored. So I would love to see real active work in going to the community centers instead of being inside the library, setting out a table outside, the big side, counselors here, come talk to us, more opportunities like that. Thank you, and go to the schools.
Allison,
I mean, that was a great answer by Harrison. So, but you know, another thing is, and I'm not going to plug myself here, but you also have to look at electing councillors who live in your neighborhoods. You got Catherine Pope and Herman Ma, who are both in this area. You have to get a little bit of local representation. I know that's not a plug for myself, but for myself, I have committed to treating the position of councillor as a full-time job and trying to be out in the community as much as possible. And like Harrison said, you have to come to people. You have to make democracy so easy that it can't be avoided. And there's a bunch of more creative ways we should do that. Like, I think council should come to pubs and coffee shops and just set up, you know, hey, you're coming to have a, you know, I think that would be a lot of fun. You get some people who aren't normally engaged with politics there. And we also kind of touched on this in a few other all candidates meetings. I think Matthew Bond touched on this. We need to have more accessible elections where there's public forums and centers that have information that are less of a cost burden to candidates and more accessible for residents to get that information about candidates during elections. Thank you.
I'll make this quick because it's getting late. I've already committed in the North Shore News to hold a weekly coffee meeting as a councillor if I were to be elected. And I did a little practice run just the other day at Delaney's in Lynn Valley. And it was wonderful. You know, I just stuck a little card there and I actually had some people come and engage with me. So I think we need to, as councillors, we're paid enough to go to the community once in a while, at least once a week, where we can, to meet and greet and hear and listen and absorb what is going on in different communities. I live in Lynn Valley, but I would be more than happy to travel to every corner of the district to learn about what the challenges are to best serve the people. I think it's incredibly important. And the second piece is, if I could just add this, let's get the youth involved. Our 19-year-old son can't wait to vote, and he's bringing all his friends too, because he finally understands what it means, how he's going to be impacted, especially as it relates to the cost of housing and the environment. So the quicker we can get on TikTok, I think would be good. I think we could do a TikTok mayoral dunk, maybe. I think the sooner we will spool up and get these young people engaged.
On behalf of all of us, I would like to thank those. Oh, we have one more wild card. Oh, sorry. Hey.
I'll just make it really quick. That is what I do. When the Naughton issue came up in Deep Cove, I went out there to meet with a group of residents, and then I probably made about 4 other trips on my own to walk around and really talk. And I spent hours out there talking to those people. So I don't just service where I live, I service all of the district because I work for all of the district. And I make a habit of going into a certain area and knocking on a few doors and talking to people. So maybe more of us need to do that more often. Thank you.
Thank you. On behalf of everybody here, I'd like to thank the members for all they've done so far, and I'd like to thank them and the other candidates for being willing